Hello, entrepreneurs. Joe DiChiara, CPA slash entrepreneur, coming to you with our first ever guest episode. And I really have a special guest for you today. If you're listening for the first time, let me explain what this podcast is all about. It's all about self-employed professionals and their journey, their entrepreneurial journey, the peaks and valleys, the roller coasters we go through, the pain points, the rags to riches, back to rags, back to riches story. And you know, if you ever talk to a real successful, honest entrepreneur, they're going to tell you their secret bad stuff. Okay, they're going to be transparent because if you ever meet a successful entrepreneur that never hit those obstacles, those days when they wish they just went back to work, they're lying to you. That's the truth. And that's what this podcast is all about. And today, this podcast, I handpicked this guest. He's been a friend for a long time. I met him online. I don't even remember how we met, but I can go back. I interviewed him, he interviewed me. We made an instant connection. This man was actually left for dead. Okay. His story is inspiring. And I'll let him talk about that. But you know, he has a saying that stuck with me. Tell me I can't, and I'll show you I can. And he has done this. I've watched him over the last 5 years go from a waiter with no business background, to having an award-winning top 2% podcast. And I actually hired him to be my podcast coach. So he's directly responsible for this podcast. So without further ado, let me introduce you to my friend, my client, my mentor, Mr. Vincent Lanci. Hello, Vincent.
Hey Joe, thanks for having me. And everyone, before we get started, make sure you subscribe to this podcast because I'm just the first of a lot of value-filled guests who are going to come here and talk about those peaks and valleys that he previewed.
Yes, yes. So let's start, Vincent, you know, because I learned from you. We want to keep this on track, right? We want to keep this to, you know, 30 minutes or less because we know that people don't have a lot of time. And to be honest with you, one of the biggest problems, and you know this now, the biggest obstacles that business owners have, and they don't realize it, is once you start a business, you're out of time, right?
Yeah, there's never enough hours in any day.
Right. But the truth is, you know, Elon Musk has the same amount of time as us. So there is a way to do it. So let's go back. Let's give our listeners a brief history of where you got started, which was back when you were still in college, right?
Yeah, I left snowflakes for palm trees. That was my goal in 2009. And then a few days before what should have been my last semester, I was hit by a car that left a bar. I was walking home, woke up about a week later out of a coma, had to relearn to walk and talk, and didn't know what school I went to. And through this process, I eventually began sharing my story. I was a finance MBA grad, infatuated with that corner office and job title and all the things that came with it. And then my last experience in corporate pushed me off so much where I decided to go 1 foot in, 1 foot out to entrepreneurship and eventually go all in. Whereas Joe said, being a waiter, 28-year-old busboy with an MBA. You have to learn to swallow your ego. I mean, teaching English online in Beijing, 4 to 10 a.m. because they're 12 hours ahead for $10 a class if I hit my quota, right? So there's a lot of sacrifice that has to come in the very, very early days in order to start to see a little progress.
Yeah. So, you know, as far as being a waiter, probably my friend is very successful. He's a guy, I'll talk about him on the show. Another one of my mentors, Craig Duswalt, toured with Guns N' Roses for 3 years, Air Supply for 5 years. And when he was done with Guns N' Roses, you know what he did because he wanted to be an actor? He went and waited tables. And that actually got him on General Hospital. He was waiting a table and a guy said, "Hey, are you an actor? And he said, of course I am. I'm a waiter. Anyway, there's no, thank you for sharing that. I respect waiters. I happen to know a lot of them. And you weren't just a waiter, you were a waiter at like a top-notch restaurant. So don't,
I had a, well, at
lower.
that restaurant, it was also, I learned like the most toxic place I've ever worked by far. It was fine dining and it was near the Yankee spring training facility. So I would have all those guys come in, judge and whatever, but had to start as a busboy and start learning the menu. And then eventually that was still deterring away from this and building this business. But I get it where you need to put food on your table and pay your bills. I mean, a lot of people say just leave that and just put all your time in this, but you don't want to be homeless at the same time. So you've got to find ways to bridge that gap. And then part of being a waiter, though, is one of my other sayings is it only takes one connection, one conversation to change your life. You're having conversation with some pretty big people in there. John Cena's there all the time. Back when Joe Girardi was the manager, that was the Yankee time, right? So Judge was younger and Gardner, excuse me, sir. You have a lot of learning lessons with teamwork and leadership, but also, again, time management. I still had to, I was wearing all the hats, edit my shows, do my networking, write my books, whatever, and not make an excuse about it.
Yes. So I want to go back because you sort of like just skipped over. You went through a lot of pain and suffering after your accident, and they basically told you you'll never be able to take care of yourself, you'll never be able to walk. Is that correct?
Well, it started out as I may not make it through the night. Then it evolved to I may need 24/7 aid the rest of my life. Then it was I may never finish school again. So, with that, I learned expectations are just that what other people expect. If you dedicate yourself to something and you hold yourself accountable, good things can happen. And I promise there were a lot of times I wanted to give up. And I mean, starting out, some of the earlier memories, I'd have a stranger come in and get me dressed, strip me head to toe, like, which is weird, right? An older woman in this case coming in, putting me in the wheelchair, rolling me down the hallway to ride an arm bicycle, right? Because I woke up, she said, the nurse, which school do you go to? I said Pulaski Road Elementary School. So that's how far back my brain was. I was 21
Wow.
studying finance, but I was a kindergartner. So I had to ride an arm bicycle. And then once I started graduating kindergarten and hating this, how tedious this is, and it's boring, and I'm just, why am I here? But once you get out of denial and you accept that it is what it is, sit and sulk, cry, why me, or you do something that, accountability and resilience I needed to embody carries over to entrepreneurship because, I mean, Joe and I talk quite a bit. He does my accounting services as well. So when we're talking, I mean, it's not uncommon for an entrepreneur to face these kind of waves in business, but
Yes.
the goal is to slowly get as far away from you can as that bottom. But I'm over 10 years in doing this, and I promise the downs still exist.
Oh yeah, that's life, and you've learned that. We're going to talk about that. But looking at you now, they couldn't imagine. And even when I met you, you were like you are now. It was like, oh my God, this is an inspiring story. And I like to tell people that there's two types of business people. There's the type of businessman that goes into business because they want to make money. Okay. They can buy a franchise, and there's nothing wrong with that. But the other type of businessman, which I am, is an entrepreneur. I was born an entrepreneur. It's in our blood. We do things that defy logic, right? That's us. We quit our jobs before we even have a business. We go homeless sometimes, but we just keep going and going. So you're the real entrepreneur. Okay. So when I met you, you didn't have a business idea. What you had was a passion. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I started sharing my story. So I wrote a book that the first one takes the longest, like 4 years or something. Shout out to Ray Roel for helping me put it through. And then, started a podcast. I liked it. I liked sharing my message, but there was no business plan or model or real focus more than this is fun. Let's see where it goes.
Yeah, so let's go back to because I believe, if you follow your passion, right, it'll work itself out. The business will work itself out. If you say, this is what I want to do, and if it's geared towards helping people, that's even more powerful because you're basically taking the money out of the equation. Not that you don't want to make money. I mean, we're in business. We want to become multimillionaires if possible, but it's more than just the money. And what I saw was you started talking about mental health, right? You want to talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, through the story I shared, it probably isn't a surprise that that's in one of my podcasts. But right before that, December, I think 7th, oh, as we're recording a few days away, will be 6 years of that entrepreneur show, at least one a week. Sometimes there's more than that. Because I not only wanted to learn from other successful people, but I wanted to give people the value that didn't have the resources, people that really were willing to put in 20, 30 minutes to listen so they can grow. Then a couple of weeks later, I did a mental health break where I interview advocates and professionals around the world to just share their story. Everybody has a different area of specialty and expertise, like in life, right? Everybody's good at 4 or 5 things. Same thing. Bring those to a podcast and give others that value, that experience. And with mental health break, it's more, hey, you are never alone. We've got some real successful people on there from the public perception, right? But also battle things. I mean, you name it, husband burning on fire in an airplane crash, losing a child, overdose, you name it. But through collective stories, it started building this business out, right? That okay, I share impactful stories, but at that time I'm doing it for free all the way around.
Yeah, and I always looked at you as like this guy has an inspiring story and it's powerful. I'm sure that you realize how because you're impacting people's lives. It's common now. People suffer from depression, anxiety, physical disabilities. And when you tell your story, what you're telling them is, hey, I was left for dead and look at me now, you know. And it's really the mindset, I believe. Our minds are a powerful thing. I one of my favorite books is Norman Vincent Peale, The Power of Positive Thinking. And that always reminds me of you, right?
It's not always
So
that easy, so everybody doesn't, get confused. I mean, there are times when you have no revenue, like this summer, right? I had revenue coming in, but I wasn't closing the year-long deals like I had been accustomed to, and you don't feel the best. But again, you have to position yourself as, for me at least, back in that office where I'm making at the time much, much more money, but I was not happy, right? I'm sitting in 2 hours of traffic each way. And for some, that's what they want. That's what works. There's nothing like a Friday direct deposit. I unfortunately can't relate in that area. But for us, it's okay. We have the ability to dictate the day how we please, right? Do we want to time block my podcasting today? Do I want to work really early and go see my mom, right? All of these things we can do. But the sacrifice, of course, is immense. If you don't like working 40 hours a week, do not even fathom the idea of starting a business because you can literally work the entire day, every day. You'll get an idea and try to fix something. But that's a whole nother conversation of resting and taking breaks or
well,
a mental health day.
and the truth is, those are the people I want to connect with because I tell people entrepreneurship isn't for everybody. If you read the description of this podcast, it's like we're gonna be raw. We're gonna talk about the pain and the suffering because people go into business like myself thinking, oh, this is gonna be a breeze. I drove my ice cream truck. It was so easy. I had kids running at me with money. It's always going to be like that. And then once you get into business, it's shocking, and the first shock is, oh my God, there's 100 things to do. They're all a top priority. And I'm not good at any of them. I'm good at two of them, right?
Exactly, right? We got our skills.
Yeah. So I want to talk to you about what was the mechanism. How did you figure out? Because you said you're doing this for free. You don't do it for free anymore. So what was the lightning bolt that the idea, hey, I could actually make money at this. Take me through that.
Well, I'll give credit where it's due in a second, but as far as starting, if there's any solopreneurs out there where you really don't have the budget to outsource anything, now, of course, Joe and I have learned how to use other countries to help supplement our workforce. So reach out to one of us for that. but use the resources you have, right? I had a MacBook. It came with GarageBand. I called Apple support. Hey, I want to start a podcast. I saw I can online. Can you teach me the basics of what I would need to do? Then, of course, you grow and you evolve, use different programs and softwares, but that is free other than your time. Again, you're putting time in. If something takes you 3 hours to do and you could pay someone else more, money, that I'll put it like this. I read a book by Jeb Blount. I think it was called The Fanatical Prospecting. And it says, okay, in 3 hours, how much do you make if you're working? Whatever that number is. For easy steak, we'll say $20, right? Then you go to edit this podcast and it takes you 10 hours, right? And now out of that, how much did you make? You would have made more money outsourcing it than doing it yourself. So, I mean, definitely find a way to outsource, but to not go too far from your question, I went into a startup incubator program to finally really take me out of the restaurant biz, right? We all think we know everything, but we don't. We need help. In the interview process, I'm saying, oh, hey, I get a lot of incoming podcast guest requests, right? They're like, well, are you doing that for free? I'm like, yeah, they want to come on the show. They're like, you have X amount of downloads, that you start charging people. So now there's a packet and it created a whole system where, okay, I get incoming requests. I forward to Danica, my assistant, start the process. From then, she sends them the packet, and now we're automating with Go High Level, but the process is send them the packet. Then once they send payment, we send them a podcast information sheet to gather the information so we're prepared and they're prepared. What areas do you want to talk about? Only then, if there's a waiver, would go, but then do you book them on your calendar or your podcast blocks? You will play the waiting game forever, and your time is your most valuable. So from there, I got in the program. I was doing a lot of ghostwriting at that time. I think I did 8 books in 14 months or something for other people to build this. And then they're like, yeah, but you're good at podcast production too. So ended up getting a really good first client. So shout out to the Loth Center for getting me in that program, Bert and Josh. And then the first client, shout out to Tampa General Hospital, who really gave me the credibility now to pursue other individuals, whether private individuals, business, or B2B.
So here's the lesson. So I didn't know you went into an incubator. That's interesting. So
Yeah.
you reached out to somebody for help, and that's a mistake a lot of entrepreneurs make. They never ask for help. Number one, they think it's too expensive. They think that asking for help is like a weakness. But I don't know anybody today that's in business that doesn't have a coach, a mentor, a team, a mastermind group, right? So, and there are free resources out there. People don't realize this. In New York State, I was part of a New York State program where I was a mentor. So I volunteered to mentor people for free. And I love doing it. So there's also SCORE. I don't know if you ever heard of SCORE, these retired executives, something of executives. So you're getting people with all kinds of business experience, and you go in there, it's like having a board of directors. And you just tell them, and I sat in on a couple of those things because I had a client that was in there. And it was interesting. It was like before I knew about the mastermind concept. And I remember a guy came in here with he was working for a guy that owned a restaurant, and he had he wanted to be a franchise, right? Anyway, so there are free resources out there.
Yeah, I've got a few too. If
So
anybody wants podcast resources, stick around to the end of the show because we'll give you a bunch.
yes. So now you hit on it. You made you set up the bridge is what I like to call it. You mentioned you got the Tampa General Hospital, right?
Yep.
As a client. That's I didn't even know that hospitals do podcasts, but it turns out they have whole marketing departments, right? So how did you get in there?
I tapped into my network. I went to Tampa General Hospital when I got hit by the car I talked about earlier. I serve on a few boards and committees and things like that. So I use my network. And, big shout out to Amber. She hosts Voices of Experience PFAC podcast where she keeps the patient's voice in mind. So she brings on different departments where how they keep the patient idea in mind, where everything from what the visuals look like in the hospital room to, you name it. It's really inspiring stuff, really lets people know they're not alone because we go through these traumatic situations, and sharing each other's stories can help others have a little bit less resistance when they battle it.
Yeah, awesome. So the lesson here, Vincent, thank you. You're bringing out a lot of lessons. The lesson is, and you asked me this a couple of months ago. What's the quickest way to get business? I said, the people that you know, right? The people you already know. So a lot of people go into business and they think they have to spend money on marketing, advertising, and that, they may wind up doing that. But if you can't connect with the people you already know, you might not even have a business. Okay. So you could use your network as basically a testing ground, a free testing ground. And it'll save you a lot of time, a lot of money. And believe it or not, people want to help. And that's another thing, as far as, finding a mentor. So a mentor is somebody that you just follow, they give you advice. A coach is somebody that you actually pay, you have regular meetings with them. Finding a mentor is easy. All you got to do is ask. So
That's it.
you find a successful person and you say, "Listen, I'm starting a business. I was wondering if I could pick your brain a little." And you'd be surprised how many yeses you will get. So did you want to add something to that?
Well, I mean, I could shout out some of my early mentors if you don't mind. Even back in
Yeah.
high school, Dave Scott. I was every fifth grader in the fifth grade student, excuse me, in each class gets put into this community service initiative. So I was in that through senior year. So Dave Scott, and then Lee Bell when I got here in Tampa, and then of course I got to grad school, and they didn't make it mandatory, but there was this in the Sykes College of Business at UT, high level CEOs and people that want to give back. They're looking for mentees, excuse me. So I connected with Rod Buchan. This is back in 2014. We're still in contact, go
Wow.
visit him in his house. So, and then of course, now there's too many people to thank, including, Joe here, where like the value you'll get on this show, Joe's going to bring you his A game and talk to you about some of the things we did in different perspectives because the ups and the downs, like I said before, they're never going to end. It's just trying to find ways to not get back down there and networking. We talked about that a lot with great people. If you reach out to someone and have the courage to do that, someone may not be in the position to buy something, but chances are they're going to be willing to give you a piece of advice or two that they went through.
Yes. So I share, I think in the first podcast I did, I said, Elon Musk, the richest man in the world, has plenty of bad days,
Yeah.
right? So, it's not if it's going to happen, it's when. And, part of the show is to prepare people. So, I want to wrap this up in a few minutes. And, this show is all about the ups and downs. And recently you experienced a big down. Okay. So you had let's just paint the picture. You started the podcast, you had a big client, this hospital's a big client. You start charging guests to come on your podcast. You're getting other clients, everything's going good. You got money coming in, you're building your team, you're automating stuff, life is good, right? And then all of a sudden, one day the faucet turns off and you called me. Can you share that if that's okay, if you don't mind?
Yeah, I had well, we'll go back last year. Great Q3, great Q4, great Q1. Pretty much May 1st, I learned now this is a big lesson learned because it's cyclical. Personal development and self-improvement takes a back seat come summer months with travel and things. So it wasn't that they were ghosting, it's they're doing things that they consider more important. So from there, I had a pretty good success with LinkedIn cold messages, which is hard with the spam and doing these things. Not as easy right now. I'm getting business, right? Granted, the podcast guesting business model provides revenue when the big checks don't for some smaller bills and for payroll. But as far as finding people who want to commit to self improvement in May, June, July, August, and September when you're traveling, you're with family and friends was challenging for me because you still have a payroll, you still have your monthly bills. So without consistent revenue, things change. So even now, as we're planning into the new year, as we're recording this, I'm trying to have my first 6 months, not just a payroll, but living completely handled because then I'm anticipating the summer may be different, but something through this lesson learned now I'm going to be doing more is brain injury coaching, not just for people that went through it, but for parents of others who have gone through this themselves, because this is something where brain injuries don't take a break, right? There is no summer break on brain injuries. And A lot of times they
Yeah.
do happen in the summer from, unfortunately, drinking and driving right in the summer or partying. You see people jumping off roofs, things happen. So it was an extremely challenging time, not just for myself to navigate, but my family and my friends, the people closest to me, my teachers, all of these things. So I have been doing some of that. I haven't really marketed and pushed it because I'm not ready to do that yet, probably right after Q1. But through these lessons learned, I finally said this summer, because it happened the summer before, things got slow, and it happened the summer before, where as an entrepreneur, we like to dictate our days, but I don't want to have free time. And, there's always something to do. But now, we're trying to bring on a sales team. I failed myself the last 2 years in doing this. So now I'm trying to put some pieces together that, again, we can't be good at everything. There are people who are salesmen or saleswomen, right? That's not me. I'm the owner of the company, right? So if they ask me, I may give it, now I need a salesperson. Hey, this is what we offer. This is the price, right? Pre-qualified leads. So that's a big goal for the next 60 days. I know, again, the holidays are here, so that's another stock.
Okay, but can you share with us what was your mindset? Okay. I could share it, from my perspective, but I want you to share what you were going through at that time.
Well, I felt pretty defeated a lot of days. I just couldn't believe it, right? I have things that I think are going to be happening. They continue to don't. I mean, we didn't talk about this. My lovely trip to small claims court in Hillsborough County, Florida, where I can say it's not like, the lawsuit's over, whatever. I won, but I'll never receive the money back. She did an illegal chargeback with her Amex. It was a TikToker, and the TikTok system went down months after service ended, after we decided not to renew on the company's behalf for certain reasons. I wake up in the middle of the night to a Stripe email that, hey, we're giving 7K to so and so, and they tell me at Stripe,
Yeah,
go to court.
I,
So that
I
mindset
remember that.
going down, going down. But you have to understand in entrepreneurship, there's going to be a lot of things that don't go your way. Clients may not pay on time. Clients may not, and all these things, it may not be on purpose, but things happen in life. So as long as you're surrounding yourself with better people, like my lesson learned from the court situation, where there's a certain criteria, not just a referral of business anymore. That was my second client. I'm gung ho, paying cash up front, but it led to quite a bit of turmoil.
Yeah. So if you don't mind, I'd like to share with everybody my perspective of when you called me. Is that okay with you?
Yeah, sure.
So, Vincent is also a client of mine, an accounting client, and I get a call from him. Well, we do a Zoom call. There's no more like actual calls. So he asked me to do a Zoom call. I get on with him, and he's like, "Listen, I'm gonna have to like postpone your services for until I can pay you because I don't want to not pay you and have you do all this work." And I was like, "Wait a second, what are you talking about?" And I remember my response to you was like, "After what you were through, you're gonna let this affect you?" I'm like, "You were left for dead." I'm like, "You got to be kidding me. This
Yeah.
is normal." And, I gave you some advice. I know some of it you took, but, in the end, you did what every successful entrepreneur does, and that's you didn't give up. Success requires tenacity, okay? One of the most successful entrepreneurs I ever met, he was my coach, he was my mentor, my friend Larry Broughton. He's not shy to share this. He's been close to bankruptcy. The guy's running a $200 million hotel empire. And stuff happens no matter how much, I have a saying, we plan and God laughs, right? And you put it right, basically you can only control what you can control. And you can control how you react to things. So today, for me, when I hit those times when it takes soul searching, and I know that because they never end, it's always, a different situation, a different level, okay? When I hit those now, for me, because I've hit so many of them, Vincent, I welcome them because I say, you know what? This is where you grow. This is where you learn. Yeah, it's painful. I don't want to go through this right now, but I don't really have a choice. I'm either going to figure this out because there is no quitting. There's no quitting, right? So anyway, this has been, the way I expected it. Excellent. You're an excellent guest. So I like to, people to follow you you have several podcasts, right? You're an author. How do people connect with you? How do they follow you on your podcast?
Yeah, well, thank you for the opportunity to come on your show, everyone. Please remember to subscribe to this guy because he's literally just getting started at very early on in this show. So I look forward to seeing the growth and with his work ethic, it will. My name is Vincent A. Lanci, Lanci. You can Google that and find me anywhere. If you want to email me, I have it up here on the screen, info@vincentalanci.com. And you see my shirt. This is what I do, Coming Alive podcast production. If you mention that you heard this episode today with me, I'll give you a free strategy session to hear what's in your head. No strings attached. You do not have to do any business with me, but I would love to hear what you have going on and see if there's a way I can help.
That sounds like an unbelievable offer. And trust me, when you talk to Mr. Lancy, you're gonna walk away with action items. You're gonna walk away if you have
Oh,
any
yeah.
questions about launching your own podcast, even about business, about mental health, you're gonna walk away saying, you know what, I'm glad I had that conversation with Vincent Lancy.
Well, and then remember,
So
coaching's not for everyone. Me and Joe talk a lot about YouTube videos being out there. I have some tips out there. If you'd like to learn in a book, I want to start a podcast. My book is a workbook. You actually build your show through the book with all my experiences in it and like affiliate codes and all that good stuff. And then Pod O'Clock, the podcast that teaches you how to podcast. So everyone, just stick to what you like, stick to what you know. We talked about that a lot, and I'm sure good things will follow. So Joe, thank you so much again.
thank you. You're a blessing. I'm glad that I have you in my life. That workbook was gold. It was gold because I've done this before. I've had a podcast. I'm not a beginner. But when I went through your workbook, it was like it laid everything out for me. All the questions. I was like, when I was done with it, I'm like, I'm ready to do this.
And the
You know,
funny
I
part is
had
none of that was like AI build me an outline of my book. That was actually me like thinking, going through my process. And I appreciate the kind words. I might have to ask you for the video version so I can get a little clip of that because that was very kind to you about the book.
oh yeah. Yeah, I'll have my video guy
And then,
talk
yeah,
to
he
your
got the
video.
PDF because he lives a little further away from me. So the mail isn't exactly possible as quick. So again, PDF, but it is an actual handbook, workbook. You go through, you build it out, and you'll catch yourself saving time in areas that I neglected, forgot, had no idea because podcasting, excuse me, wasn't really as big back in 2019. It was, but today it's the perfect thing to do, the best business card
It's
you ever need.
It is. And I'm glad that I started this. So that's my story. I'm sticking with it. Joe DiChiara, CPA/entrepreneur, over and out. Subscribe to How to Win Big at Business and follow Vincent Lancy. That's my advice. Have a good day, night, wherever you are. And again, God bless and goodbye.